You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. In 2021, Jennifer Poole was tragically killed by her then ex-boyfriend. Heartbroken from her loss, her family decided to make a stand and not let Jennifer's death be in vain.
Campaigning for a domestic abuse registry to be introduced is Jennifer's brother and domestic violence advocate, Jason Poole. You're welcome to the show, Jason. So tell us about yourself, Jason.
I am from Finglas. I'm a secondary school teacher, and I do a lot of work, voluntary work within the community, at youth clubs, summer projects, and I suppose just giving back to the community, yeah.
Tell us about your sister.
Jennifer was 24 when she died. She had 2 young children. Jennifer was, I suppose, one of these that just loved life. She was an all-round good person. She was quite caring. She worked in a nursing home, and she was the life and soul of the party. I suppose you used to see her just in her best. You know, you never really seen anything else other than her best, and you always heard the car and the music before you'd see her. You know, that was one thing that we remember very well.
Yeah, so she's full of life.
Yeah.
You were absolutely adored by everybody.
Yeah.
She looks like she was absolutely great crack and very caring as well. But it almost beggars belief, though, when you think what actually happened to her. Tell us about her relationship with Gary, the man who ultimately killed her.
Yeah, I suppose she was in a relationship with Gavin for just under 13 months. It was quite quick at the very beginning. And he had moved into her home very quickly as well. They had met through a neighbour who was a relative of Gavin's. And I suppose from there, it kind of, being in COVID, you kind of seen very little because you were, you know, keeping your distance, and Jennifer was working in a nursing home. So she didn't really have that, you know, she'd still see her every day, but you wouldn't have had that time frame that we would have normally had with her. Did I like him? From the beginning, no. There was just something about him, but as a family, we didn't really know what it was. We didn't know what coercive control or domestic violence or what red flags were. You know, there were small little things like her key had gone missing, or she wouldn't be out with her friends. She stopped going to GA. She stopped going to the gym. You know, you'd see her and she'd be only in and out, and the phone be ringing, and he'd be driving her car. There was small little things where you'd go up and visit her in the house, and he'd go into another room, or he'd be answering the questions for her. There were small little things, but you just thought, you know, he's a little bit of an odd person, maybe, you know.
Make her world smaller and smaller and smaller, and to ultimately centre around him, was it?
100%. And I suppose when we look at it now, they're the red flags in a relationship. But we didn't know, as I said, what they were. And a lot of the things that we found out, we only found out through going through trial or information that the kids had given us when they were interviewed by the guards. So we were oblivious, you know. We did see Jennifer with bruises and wounds, but she always had an explanation. And, you know, like most women who are making in these relationships, they always prepare themselves for, what have I masked about this bruise? And that's what Jennifer did. You know, she blamed the kids, or I was out playing camogie and I got a smack of the hurl, or so there was always an explanation, and believable, because she had prepared in advance. Yeah. So it wasn't like, oh, she had to think about it, you know. It was always off the cuff. So you just go, oh yeah, just, you know, one of the kids hit her with an Avengers toy, or she was out playing camogie and she got a bruise and the slitter hit her in the head. So there was always an explanation, but that was her covering up and protecting us, because in hindsight what was actually happening was he was telling her that if you don't do what I'm requesting you to do, then I'm going to hurt your family.
Oh my God.
Okay. All right, so complete and utter coercive control. You're looking for this register because if one of these had been in place, this guy, he had told you that he had been in Spain for a couple of years. That's
correct, yeah, and he wasn't. He was in prison for a domestic violence offence against his ex-partner and her mother. And when he got out of prison, he told Jennifer that he had been living in Spain. He told us he was living in Spain. And at one point, he even tried to get Jennifer to move to Spain. And again, that's to remove her from her family and her friends.
OK, when she came and said, listen, Gavin wants us all to move to Spain, what was your reaction to that? Where you say, this is not going to happen?
This is not going to happen. You know, we held the kids' passports at home, so my mum had them, so there was no way Jennifer was going to ever be moving to Spain. Her life was there. She had just got her life back together. You know, she had got her own place. She'd learned how to drive. She was at the finishing her courses. She had went and she got a good job in the nursing home. So she was starting to get her life on track, as most people at that age are trying to do. And then this perpetrator came in and stripped her down and rebuilt her to the way that he wanted.
OK, was she vulnerable when she met him?
I think she was in a vulnerable state at times, and I think she had just realised that, you know, she had been in a previous relationship and it just didn't work out. And she had got herself back together and she was doing well for herself. She had learned how to drive in that time. She had brought the kids on their first family holiday. So she was really, really, you know, getting her life on track and had finished all her college courses and was working in the job that she loved. You know, she loved working with the elderly in the nursing home, and that was just her. She was an all-round good person, and, you know, that was really what he played on. He played on her strengths and stripped them from her.
Statistically, the most dangerous time for a woman to be in risk of their health and their well-being is when they break up with their abuser. Was that something that...
It was. Jennifer had tried 7 or 8 times previously to leave, but with the cycle of abuse, there is those 8 stages. And within stage 6 or 7, that's when they're most at risk, and that's when they decide to leave. And in Jennifer's case, she had broke up with Gavin the week before. She had removed everything from the home. And, you know, there's always that, in most of the cases, if you look at the statistics, there's that one last time. I need to give you this, or I need to return something. And that's when they make their move, because, you know, I think there's an element of, you know, if I can't have you, nobody else can. And that was exactly what happened on the day that Jennifer died. It was that one last time. Yeah,
and you heard throughout the court process as well, you heard some very disturbing things about him.
Yeah, like Gavin had lots of previous convictions that we weren't aware of for assault and then obviously the domestic violence ones. And even while he was in prison for the murder of Jennifer, he was still going to court for other outstanding charges that had appeared before he had even met Jennifer. So this is a man who was never going to change. And most perpetrators out there, it is a cycle. When they break up with the previous partner, they go and they start that cycle again with their next partner.
And it escalates.
And it escalates, and they get better at it. They get better at covering their tracks. They get better of knowing what didn't work the last time and what they need to do this time to even make it better.
Okay. You're campaigning for this register. It exists in the UK.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called Clare's Law
yeah.
in the UK. You want it to be introduced and, you know, in tribute to your sister and be called Jennie's Law.
Yeah.
You've gathered quite a few signatures to this petition.
Yeah, we launched an online signature, an in-person signature campaign last week, and the online one is just over 16,000 and we've over 4,000 in written signatures. We plan to do it for the next couple of weeks. We're in different shops and we've done it online, as we said, but this is a campaign that we started over 2 years ago with Helen McEntee as Minister for Justice at the time, and we've had lots of different meetings and I've linked in with lots of different agencies, and there's a real need for the register. Jim O'Callaghan, as Minister for Justice now, had worked with me and Senator Fiona O'Loughlin and Paul McAuliffe, our local TD, of bringing a private member's bill to the Dáil. But then the general election was called and it only had got through this Shannon. So we're not starting from scratch, I suppose, because Jim was aware of this as a TD and he is committed to it. It is in the programme for government. But I suppose what we're looking for, and the reason why we're doing the online petitions and we're upping the campaign, is, you know, the government is a 5-year term and we're not looking for this to be implemented in year 5. We're looking for it to be implemented in 2025 because while we're still waiting, women are still dying at the hands of violence against men.
How are you doing now? I mean, it's a probably ridiculous question, but you yourself and your family coming back, the ramifications of a tragedy like this it's unspeakable, really. But by doing what you're doing, you must feel that you're helping in some way, because you might not have been able to save your sister, but there's other people who are watching this now that are in this similar situation, and this might be able to help them.
Yeah, I suppose we don't get Jennifer back. And, you know, other families who have lost their loved ones will never get them back. We are the ones really living the life sentence, you know, not the perpetrators, because they will get out of prison. And I suppose the reason why we're campaigning is, one, in Jennifer's memory, because if there had been a domestic violence register, Jennifer would, in my opinion, still be alive today, because there were so many people who could have supported, or she could have went out to a local Garda station, or indeed when the guards called to her house on those many occasions that we didn't know about, they would have been able to inform her. So the legislation will have the right to ask and a right to tell system in place. But for women into the future, that's what we're really doing, because, you know, for us as a family, we're not able to function some days. Some days you don't want to get up out of bed. Some days you don't want to go to work. You know, the grief doesn't end. But this piece of work, particularly that we're doing as a family, is keeping us strong, you know, and it's in memory of Jennifer.
Yeah, it's a tribute to your sister. We wish you well with it, and we hope that it comes into place very, very soon.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for coming to talk to us today, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, if you've been affected by what we're speaking about here, you can go to virginmedia.ie/helplines, and that will hopefully give you the help or point you in the right way for any help you may need. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. We'll be back after this short break.